Hello and welcome to Mr. Zimbrick's video lecture series. You are probably watching this because you were absent, you got pulled from class, or you missed some notes for whatever reason, and you want to get caught up. So thank you for meeting me here today. We are going to talk today about some genetics. We are in the first lesson of genetics, or what makes you, you. Genetics is part of that answer. There is more to it than just that, though, and we'll learn about that in the future. Today we're going to talk about specifically nucleotides and DNA. And so nucleotides is going to be the title of our notes today. And our learning intention is, what are three components of every piece of DNA? The answer to this is going to be partially in nucleotides, but mainly what are nucleotides made of? If you don't know even what a nucleotide is yet, don't know what DNA is, all that's fine. We're going to be talking about that today. So without any further ado, you can pause here if you need to and write this down into your notes. I'm going to keep going though, so that's up to you. Okay, in our notes today we are doing a quick write. You can elaborate on what exactly is DNA. What is it made from? What does it look like? Where can you find it? And if you want to, what does it do? Today I'm specifically interested in the structure of DNA, which is that what does it look like part. But if you want to, or if what you know more about is function, what does it do, you can talk more about that too. As a little hint to you, to maybe get you started, I have this picture of a beautiful spiral staircase. If that helps you think of something or jars some memory about the structure of DNA, then you could write about why. Pause here, write down a few thoughts. I'm looking for like 2 sentences in your quick write today. And when you get that done, you can hit play again, and we will continue. All right, DNA is shaped like, in the larger sense, it's like a spiral staircase. Over here on the right, I have a nice, cool looking spiral staircase. And we see it has 2 sides to it, one here and another side out here. And so it goes with DNA as well. You could imagine each of these is like a rung or a stair that we could walk up to get to the next floor. And so DNA, we say, is a double helix because it has not one helix but 2. And it's also structured like a ladder where it has these rungs in it. We're going to talk more about these rungs coming up, but for right now in our notebook, you can just write that its general structure is a double helix ladder shape. Both of these are important for upcoming pieces of information that we'll be learning. Let's take a look at this ladder structure and think to yourself, what is something you notice about the structure of this image? Just think to yourself. Okay, maybe you noticed that we've got some A's and some T's that are red and yellow. We got some G's and C's. They're aligned in different ways. Maybe you noticed though that there's this repeating pattern that I'm seeing, which is DNA seems to be made from these smaller chunks, and they just get stacked together. And that is hopefully one of the things that you noticed. DNA is really just small pieces that get added on to each other. It starts from a single piece. That's going to be called our nucleotide. Nucleotide is the basic component of DNA, and then we add nucleotides on to each other to get these long strands of DNA. So here we have one nucleotide, we put this one on top of it, we put this one on top of it, we put this one on top of it. Next thing you know, we have a really long strand of DNA. And in our body, in a single cell, we have 3.2 billion of these little rungs. Boom, 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 boom. 3.2 billion in every single cell. We have trillions of cells. We just have tons and tons of these ladders in our body. Okay, so we're saying DNA is kind of like a ladder, and it's one piece that gets added onto each other over and over again. Turns out there's some scientific terms for that. Okay, DNA is a polymer of nucleotides. That's our scientific way of saying this. Let's look at a more conventional understanding of polymers and monomers and what that means. Okay, the term monomer is the term we would use for a single piece of something. Here my example is Legos. This is a single Lego. It's a monomer. They're not connected in any way, they're just laying about. If this is how our DNA was, well, it wouldn't be very useful for us because it would be all scrambled. The cool thing about DNA and the important part of DNA is the order in which these pieces are put together. When we polymerize Legos, which is to say when we put them together, we can make really fascinating structures. Here we have some really tall towers right here. You may have built something like this when you're like 5 years old. But we can say this is a polymer because it takes many single pieces and they get put together. And so DNA is very similar in that it is a polymer, and each one of these things right here, like the single Lego piece, gets stuck to another one, gets stuck to another one, gets stuck to another one, and we build these really long chains of DNA. So DNA is a polymer of nucleotides, the same way that this tower is a polymer of Legos. All right, that's the analogy that we're going to be operating under. Now, if you're following along on the note sheet that I have posted online, you can add this in. If you're writing this down in notes on your own, what you could do is you could write up this analogy. DNA is to nucleotides the way a Lego tower is to a single piece of Lego. Right, next up. All right, here we are. This is our basic component of DNA. It's a nucleotide. DNA is made out of strings of nucleotides. It's a polymer of nucleotides, and each of these nucleotides has 3 distinct components. This is where our learning intention for today comes in. Every nucleotide is just made out of 3 things. A phosphate group, we have right here. It's made out of a sugar, deoxyribose in the case of DNA, and then we have this nitrogen base. Phosphate group, sugar, and base. Those are the 3 things that DNA is made out of. All right, let me get myself out of the way here. Now the phosphate group we're going to look at in the next slide, and the sugar form a backbone, and then the base is going to be for giving us that genetic information that is the code of life. Okay, let's take a look at the backbone. The backbone of our DNA is made from the phosphate group, which has this P right at the center here, and it connects to other nucleotides. That's what the phosphate is good at doing. It bridges the nucleotides. The sugar, or the deoxyribose, that is going to serve as a bridge between our phosphate and the base. Okay? If we were to string a bunch of these together, like so, we can bring in another nucleotide. It's going to connect from the phosphate group to the sugar. We bring in some more, phosphate group to sugar, phosphate group to sugar. And now you can see what we've done is we polymerized this molecule, and we have lots of them stringing together, and that's what DNA is. And at the backbone of that, we have our phosphate group and our deoxyribose group right here. Okay, so we have learned that DNA is a polymer of nucleotides. We've learned that nucleotides have a phosphate group, a sugar group, and then a base. And these bases, it turns out, are the most important part of DNA. And it's the most important part of the nucleotide because this is what contains that genetic information that makes us, us. If DNA is the code of life, then the nucleobases are the language that this code is written in. We have cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine. Now, those are long terms. You don't necessarily need to remember cytosine, guanine, adenine, thymine, but I do want you to know that there are 4 of them. There are 4 distinct bases in DNA, and I do want you to know that there is C, G, A, T. That's what I want you to know, no matter what level you're at. And these nucleobases, in the order of them, is what gives us our genetic information. We're going to talk more about this in the future. But for your notes, as far as I'm concerned, just know that there's 4 distinct bases, 4, A, C, G, T. Okay, and these 4 bases will then pair with each other, and that's why we have a double helix. If we just had a single helix, we wouldn't get any base pairing, but we know that DNA has that ladder, so it has a backbone on both sides, and that's because the bases, they want to pair with each other. Cytosine over here will always pair up with a guanine. Adenine is always going to pair with a thymine, and so on. And that's why we get the ladder. Backbone over here, base is in the middle. Adenine with thymine. Thymine with, that's cytosine with guanine. Now again, we have thymine, adenine. A-T, C-G, A-T, G-C, and so on. In your notes, you can just write down that G always pairs with C, A always pairs with T. And that's where we are today. Okay, so to wrap all this up in summary, the general structure of a nucleic acid, and DNA in particular, is a helix. DNA is a double helix because it has these two backbones to it, whereas something like RNA only has one. DNA is just a long chain of nucleotides. It's a monomer, is nucleotides, and they get chained together to make DNA. And its function then is to store genetic information. That's what I want you to get out of today's lesson. Last part today, monomer, polymer. Okay, the last part today, and this is what we did in class, just so you're familiar with this, just so you know that this is what we did. We took some Twizzlers and toothpicks and gummy bears, and then we made these nice, beautiful chains of DNA. And we wrote out, we labeled the different parts of our DNA and what each one might represent. Now, if you're watching this at home or you're not in class, I can't really expect you to do this, but what you could do in replace of this is just draw out on that left page, the blank page in your notes, you could draw out a chain of DNA, and you could say, I know it's got a phosphate backbone, the phosphate's connected to a ribose, and then that gets connected to a base. And then that is a single nucleotide, and those nucleotides get chained together to make really long ones. You could draw a picture, you could find a picture online to paste into your notes. That's up to you. I just wanted to let you know what we did. All right, so thank you for watching today. What you can do for your summary is just quickly review the three components. You should be able to list the three components of DNA, and you should also know what a polymer is. That's what you could reflect on. What is a polymer, and how is DNA an example of it? All right, so thanks for listening today. If you have any questions, come find me in class. Otherwise, nice job. I'll see you later.